If you grew up in Britain before central heating became normal, winter wasn't a season. It was a routine. A routine of managing cold like it was a household chore, the same way you managed washing, money, and meals. Because the truth is, for a long time, British homes didn't stay warm. They became warm in one place for a few hours if you worked for it. And once you understand that, you understand an entire era of British life. Why families gathered the way they did, why homes smelled the way they did, why evenings felt different, and why people remember winter indoors almost as much as winter outdoors. This is the real story of how British homes survived winters before central heating. Not in a nostalgic fantasy way, but in the practical, sometimes uncomfortable, oddly ingenious way people actually lived. Picture a typical British house in the mid-20th century. A terrace, a semi, maybe a council house depending on the area. Solid walls often hard to heat. Drafts that found every gap. Condensation on windows. Damp that could creep into corners when warmth didn't reach them. And the most important detail, warmth was not a background setting. Warmth was a project. So the first rule of winter survival was the rule everyone remembers, even if they never called it a rule. One warm room. The living room, the front room, the sitting room, became the centre of life because it was where the heat was, not where the vibes were, where the heat was. That room had the fireplace, or later a gas fire, maybe an electric heater if the household could afford it. And when it was on, the whole house behaved differently. Doors shut, curtains pulled. Everyone drifted toward that room like gravity. Because in winter, the rest of the house wasn't just cold, it was pointless. You didn't hang out in an icy bedroom for fun. You didn't sit in a chilly hallway. You didn't wander. You gathered. And that gathering shaped family life more than people admit. If everyone is in one warm room, you talk more. You argue more. You share space more. Kids can't disappear into endless screens. Adults can't retreat into their own corners. A British winter evening created forced togetherness. That's why people remember it so strongly. Not because it was always cosy, but because it was intense. Now let's talk about the engine of that warm room. For decades, the beating heart of many British homes was the fireplace. Coal fires, coke, sometimes wood. Later, gas fires. Different fuels in different places. But the idea was the same. Heat came from a visible source you had to feed, which meant winter survival started long before bedtime. It started with fuel management. Someone had to carry coal. Someone had to store it. Someone had to deal with the dust and the mess. In many houses, coal lived under the stairs, in a coal bunker, a coal hole, or a coal shed. Practical spaces built because the house was designed around this reality. Then came the ritual. Rake the grate, clear the ash, build the fire. Paper first, then kindling, then coal. Wait, adjust, guard it like it's alive. Because a good fire wasn't only warmth, it was control. When that fire was going, the house felt possible. When it wasn't, the house felt hostile. And the smell, that smoky, mineral winter smell, became the scent of evenings and weekends and childhood. You'd come in from outside with cold hands and red cheeks, and the first thing you did wasn't check your phone. You went to the fire. You held your hands out. You turned them slowly. You watched your fingers stop hurting. That moment is almost a lost human experience now. But a fire alone wasn't enough. Because British cold isn't just temperature, it's damp. So winter survival meant fighting damp constantly, without calling it mould prevention. It meant drying clothes, drying shoes, drying the house itself. And this is where Britain's genius little home features matter. Some homes had an airing cupboard, often built around a hot water tank, which acted like a low-tech drying machine. Towels lived there. Uniforms got warmed there. Bedding got aired there. It quietly kept damp at bay. If you didn't have an airing cupboard, you had strategies. Clothes hung near the fire. laundry draped over chairs, socks placed where the warmth could reach them. Today, we'd call that clutter. Back then, it was winter survival. Because if clothes stayed damp, the house felt colder. If the house felt colder, you needed more fuel. And fuel cost money, everything connected. Now think about windows. Older British windows, especially single glazing, could feel like sheets of ice. So people built insulation with whatever they had. Heavy curtains. Curtains that didn't just look nice. Curtains that performed a job. You pulled them early. You tucked them. You made sure no gap was leaking cold air onto the sofa. Some people used draft excluders. Some used rolled towels along the bottom of doors. And almost everyone knows the classic phrase that sums up the whole era. Shut the door. We're not heating the street. Because heat was not allowed to escape. It was expensive to create and hard to maintain. That's why older homes often had a second doorway space, a little lobby, because it trapped cold air before it reached the living areas. It's basic physics. And it worked. Then there was the floor problem. Because cold doesn't just come from outside, it comes from below. Many homes had bare floorboards upstairs, or thin carpets, or rugs that were more about warmth than style. People wore slippers like they were armour. Kids learned fast that cold feet can ruin an entire evening. So winter survival included a wardrobe shift, cardigans, jumpers, wool socks, thermal underwear if you had it. Layers that stayed on indoors. And here's a truth. Modern viewers don't always understand. For many families, being slightly cold at home was normal. Not tragic, normal. You didn't expect tropical indoor temperatures. You expected to manage. Now let's talk about the thing people remember most painfully, bedtime. Because the warm room could be warm. But upstairs could be brutal. Bedrooms weren't heated the same way, so going to bed meant crossing into cold air like you were leaving safety. And that's why Britain developed a whole winter sleep culture. Hot water bottles were not optional, they were tools. You'd fill one, maybe wrap it in a cover, and slide it under the blankets to warm the bed before you got in. Some families used two, one for feet, one for the middle. Extra blankets mattered. Flannel sheets mattered. Kids remember the shock of cold sheets and the relief when the bed warmed up and the whole world shrank to that one warm space under the covers. In the morning, getting out of bed felt like a fight. Because you weren't stepping into a warm hallway, you were stepping into winter again. And then there's bathing. Before modern boiler convenience, hot water could be limited. Some houses had hot water tanks that had to be managed. Some families had set routines. Who bathes first, who bathes last. And because the bathroom could be freezing, baths could be something you prepared for like an event. Heat the room if you can. Get towels ready. Move fast. And again, you see the theme. Winter survival wasn't one action. It was a system. A set of habits built around scarcity. Scarce heat, scarce hot water, scarce comfort. Now, here's the part where the story becomes emotional, because you might think this is only about hardship. But many people remember it with warmth, not because they miss being cold, but because the routines created something modern life sometimes lacks. A shared rhythm. The kettle going on, tea in the warm room, the radio in the background, the fire crackling. The family together because the warm room forced it. Even the boredom felt different because boredom wasn't instantly solved by screens. Kids made games, adults talked. The house was alive in a quieter way. And yes, people argued too. But those evenings created a kind of closeness you don't get when every room is warm and every person has their own private media world. This is why older Brits often describe winter as hard but proper. Not because suffering is good, because there was a feeling that you were doing something real, keeping the house going. Now, to be fair, this wasn't romantic for everyone. For some families, winter was genuinely miserable. If the house was damp, if money was tight, If fuel was limited, the cold could feel constant. Health issues could worsen. Stress could rise. Children could get sick more easily. The house could feel like it was always losing the battle. So we shouldn't pretend the past was cosy for all. But we also shouldn't pretend people were helpless. Because British homes and British habits developed smart solutions, low-tech solutions, human solutions, and they worked. So what changed? Central heating became more common, double glazing spread, insulation improved, boilers got better, appliances took pressure off laundry and hot water, homes were redesigned around a new expectation. Every room should be comfortable, and that's a good thing, but it also removed something. It removed the one warm room culture. It removed the rhythms around the fire. It removed the weird genius of things like the airing cupboard and the draft lobby. It removed the daily awareness of heat as a resource. Now warmth is automatic. Back then, warmth was something you created together. And that's why people remember it so intensely. Because winter wasn't just weather. It was a family system. A set of habits that turned a cold, damp house into a home. If you want to understand Britain in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, don't only look at politics or pop culture. Look at the house. Look at the way people lived inside four walls that weren't designed to be warm everywhere. Look at the strategies. One warm room, heavy curtains, doors shut, hot water bottles, fires, airing cupboards, tea as a reset button, and layers that stayed on indoors. Because for decades, Britain didn't survive winter by being warm. Britain survived winter by being smart, and that's something worth remembering.